Welcome to Clearly Explained Skin Exposure. I'm Ben French, a fourth year PhD candidate at the University of Toledo. To start, let's examine what the skin looks like. The skin can be broken down into several layers. First, we have the epidermis. This is the outermost layer of the skin and is held tightly by proteins that mesh together between the cells within the epidermis. This layer contains dead cells along the outermost edge, along with several important immune cells. A key feature of the epidermis is the stratum corneum, which is the top layer of the epidermis. We'll come back to this later. Next, we have the dermis. This is a deeper layer of the skin and is considerably thicker than the epidermis. Layer contains many of the nerves in the skin, sweat glands, and the root of hair follicles. Lastly, there is the subcutis. This is the deepest layer under the skin, which helps connect it to the rest of the body. This layer contains fat cells and larger branches of blood vessels. So, what does the skin do? It helps protect our bodies from the outside world. It helps keep water in our bodies. It helps produce us vitamin D. It contains the nerves for touch. It helps maintain body temperature. It's our first defense. The outermost layer of the skin, the stratum corneum, is made up of dead and dying keratinocytes, key immune cells, and many interlocking proteins that maintain the skin barrier. These include keratin, filaggrin, involucrin, and loricrin. Most people go outside, which can expose you to sunlight. Sunlight, as you probably know, includes UV radiation. Healthy skin can protect you from some UV radiation, although it isn't perfect. UV radiation does help our body produce vitamin D. The skin also protects us against pathogens trying to enter the body. The skin is not friendly to pathogens, often deflecting or killing them before they can cause harm. So, let's quickly discuss how things can get into the skin. You've probably at least heard of passive diffusion before. This is a simple process where molecules will try to make it so that the concentration of your molecule is consistent. In this case, it's clear to see that there are more of our orange molecules on the top side of the barrier than on the bottom side. If the barrier allows it, molecules will begin shifting through to make the concentration of orange molecules more consistent. They are following their chemical gradient from a high concentration to a low concentration. This process is called passive diffusion because this does not require any outside energy. The barrier does not have to pump anything from one side to the other, as long as the orange molecules can move through it on their own. But what about active transport? Active transport is often used to transport molecules that can't or won't passively diffuse into the cell, or moving something against its chemical gradient. These molecules would simply bounce off the cell if it weren't for the presence of transporter proteins. If they can find a transporter protein that it can bind to, it can begin the process of entering the cell. This process requires some amount of energy from the cell, hence the active and active transport. So what factors affect movement into and out of the cell? Three of the biggest factors in transport are the size of the molecule, if it is a polar molecule or has a distribution of charges, and if there are transporters for that molecule. These aren't the only factors, of course, but they make some of the most important differences when you try to consider molecules crossing through cellular membranes. The skin barrier is not constant or perfect, so what can cause it to change? The amount of water you drink can have a big impact on your skin. Staying hydrated is important for many reasons, not the least of which is keeping your skin healthy. Just like many other organs, including your stomach, intestines, and mouth, the skin has its own microbiome. The specific makeup of the microbiome can change general barrier health, including how well the skin fights off other microorganisms. Your skin also changes with age, just like every other part of the body. As we get old, the skin barrier can start developing more issues. UV radiation, such as what you're exposed to standing in the sunlight or going to places that use UV lights, can also affect the health of the skin. The chemicals you're exposed to may affect the skin barrier. We'll cover an example of this in a little bit. Extreme temperatures, like burns or very cold temperatures, can have a big impact on barrier function. In either extreme, temperature can cause damage to cells, which in turn damages skin health and can damage the barrier from the outside world. Some things we get exposed to can upregulate the number of transporters on a cell. So let's say we have a molecule coming towards a cell, and the molecule has transporters for it on the cell surface. Once it's bound, it can send signals through the cell that upregulate the number of transporters available. Then, as more things bind, this can create a cycle of more binding for that molecule. Or, some things can downregulate the number of transporters available. Let's reset that same situation. A molecule approaches a cell and binds to a transporter. Once it binds, it can send signals to the rest of the cell and block the production of transporters. And if that happens enough, the cell will have fewer receptors available on its surface. There are many diseases that can affect the skin, some of which may be surprising to you. In this video, though, we will use a common skin condition known as atopic dermatitis as an example. On the left here, we can see some healthy skin. The barrier is tightly formed and intact. On the right, we have diseased skin. There are more gaps between the cells, and they have fewer connections to one another. What impact does this have? Well, if you came into contact with some pathogens or a dangerous molecule, the healthy skin has a better chance of rejecting these invaders from the body. However, the diseased skin is not as sturdy as the healthy skin is. Some of these harmful entities can work their way into the skin, bypassing the barrier. Just as disease can affect how the barrier works, toxins that enter the body can change the skin barrier in pretty similar ways. As I mentioned earlier, UV radiation can affect the skin. There are several mechanisms for this, but the two big reasons are the impact that UV radiation has on DNA and on proteins. Too much UV exposure can cause DNA to start breaking apart, making it harder for the cell to properly repair itself. This can lead to more mutations. Similarly, UV radiation can break apart proteins or change the protein's shape. Proteins need to be in specific configurations to do their jobs properly, so this damage makes it so that they no longer function as efficiently, if they function at all. So, based on these factors, we can start to see how exposure can turn into a cycle. After some initial exposure, whether it's UV radiation, pathogens, or some sort of toxin, the skin barrier starts getting damage. Since the skin was pretty healthy at first exposure, only a little bit may get into the skin itself, while the rest is deflected. But since some got in and caused a bit of damage, the next exposure isn't quite the same story. Now that the barrier is broken a bit, more is able to make its way deeper into the skin, causing further damage. So, what do we get exposed to? Our skin is exposed to many things, including medicine, everything in the air around us, otherwise we wouldn't really be able to breathe, water. We're exposed to water all the time. Drinking water supplies are the same sources of water for your showers, washing your hands, and cleaning your clothes. If you enjoy swimming, then you're also exposed to anything in the water you go swimming through. Basically, we're exposed to everything we touch. And as I promised earlier, let's look at an example. Here, we can see the beautiful waters of Lake Erie near Toledo, Ohio. And here, we can see that the water has turned into a murky green color. This is due to harmful algal blooms, overgrowths of cyanobacteria that begin producing toxins. One of these family of toxins is known as microcystins. We have the structure of microcystin LR shown here, but there are over 300 members of the microcystin family. Microcystins are toxic, especially to the liver, largely because of this arm of the molecule, known as the ADA arm. But that structure is bulky and complicated, so let's just represent it with these green water droplets instead. Something you may be asking yourself is, can it get through your skin? First, let's consider passive diffusion. Microcystin is not a very small molecule. Additionally, it does not have very favorable polarity to move through the layers of the skin easily. From what we can tell so far, it does not passively diffuse through the skin. But what about active transport? Well, there are transporters for microcystin LR, and these transporters are present in the skin, meaning it's possible that it can get into the skin through active transport. Additionally, like we talked about earlier, diseases, such as atopic dermatitis, can influence how the skin barrier functions. From my work, it seems like healthy skin does an okay job of keeping most microcystin out. However, we are studying if it's different for people with atopic dermatitis. With atopic dermatitis, the barrier is weakened, and it's possible that the number of transporters available in the skin have changed. Another question you might have is, what does it matter? I can deal with a little irritation. Well, if microcystin gets on your skin, it might not stop there. If it reaches circulation, it can target several other organ systems throughout the body. These include the kidneys, lungs, heart, and liver. Remember earlier when I mentioned it is especially toxic to the liver? Skin exposure can lead to downstream organs being affected, and it's important that we understand what the implications of that are if someone is exposed. So, to review what we've learned, the skin protects the body and serves many important functions for us in our day-to-day lives. Things can be absorbed through your skin passively and actively. We get exposed to things all the time. Things are all around us. Healthy skin is pretty good at its job, but not everyone has healthy skin, and there are many factors that influence skin health. Bam! Thanks for watching.